G'day, I'm Mark Webb, the Aroma Science guy. And before we start, get your phones out. That's the URL to download this presentation and all the references that I'm talking in here, plus some extras. So just take a photo. When you get home, download it. It's all in my Dropbox. That way you don't need to take notes. Not that I think anyone's going to, but you never know. That one? Yeah. So, picture's worth 1,000 words. I'm an aromatic scientist, biochemist, formulations chemist, cosmetic manufacturer, yada yada. Didn't do it quick enough. There's another one at the end of the... Don't worry, there's another slide at the end of the show as well. You get 2 shots at it. So, I formulate across the cannabinoid area, the aromatics. I work in food beverages. I'm an extraction specialist, so I work in supercritical CO2, ethanolic and other types of extracts. Plus I travel all over the world doing harvesting and teaching as well. I'm too dense and the radio signals are not going through. Okay, so when we're looking at plant secondary metabolites, which are the things that plants make for communication and for defence, etc., we use them for medicines predominantly. That's our uses. We also use them for food, etc. as well. So I'm not going to read these slides, but basically what Dr. Michael Wink from Heidelberg University found was that plants work synergistically, that their compounds work together, and you get that synergism that adds to their efficacy. This is going to frustrate me. Okay. That's the second slide, yeah. So when we look at plant secondary metabolites across all of aromatic and medicinal plants, there's quite a few. And as you can see here, when we look at the monoterpenes and sesquiterpenes, we're talking 7,500. When we look at cannabis, however, they've only discovered 150, which is 2% of that number. So when you hear people talking about the entourage effect of terpenes with cannabinoids, they're talking about a very small subset of the possible plant medicines. That's where I come in, because I work with all the other ones. Synergy, what does it mean? Well, it's basically about working together. Right? You can read these things later. The polyvalent effect is where you get multiple constituents in a plant or multiple medicines that work together and you get a profound effect from that. One of the good examples for this, which modern medicine seems to have forgotten, is cannabis and opioids. So cannabinoids and opioids work really well together. You add a small amount of cannabinoids to your opioids, you can lower the dose levels of both and lessen the potential side effects of them. This diagram, this picture, you can tell how long ago that was made, around the 1800s. So they knew what they were doing back then. Traditional Chinese medicine, people from the Afghani region, that part of the Middle East, they also knew about this, but the opium and cannabis triangle. This is how they use these medicines together. You don't get the side effects if you use the plant medicines together. That's the take home from that slide. Come on. Aromatics, things that smell. That's the quickest and shortest definition for you. One of the things about aromatics, though, is these physical and chemical properties, which is really important in the synergy that I'm going to be talking about using with cannabinoids. Because they're very small molecules, they pass the blood-brain barrier. They also go through the dermal layer really quickly and easily. I'm going to show you some examples of aromatics that do this and actually potentiate transdermal absorption. The chemistry of them, I'm not going to bore you too much. Terpenoids. So your terpenes that people talk about in cannabis are a subset of terpenoids. Then you've got your phenolics and phenylpropanoids. the non-terpenoid aliphatics. This one here, cis-3-hexanal. Anyone played with their tomato plants recently and they've got that green tomato smell? That's what you're smelling, is that compound. And the heterocyclics, which are found have like almost a narcotic effect. Jasmine, neroli, Baronia, which is an Aussie native. When we look at the therapeutics of these aromatics, and I teach aromatic medicine, that's the internal use of aromatics as a medicinal substrate, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. When we go down through the various classes or functional groups through the melvionic acid pathway, so this is the biochemical pathway where these compounds are made, these are the effects we get. So monoterpenes, general tonics and stimulants, decongestants, good solvents. Alpha-pinene out of cannabis and out of pine oil is this. D-limonene out of orange oil is this. What do we use orange oil for? It's a good solvent. Strips fats, strips waxes. Then when we move to the phenol and phenylpropanoids, these are from the shikimic acid pathway. So in aromatic plants, you have these two biochemical pathways working in tandem. So they're basically parallel processing and making these things. And plants that are rich in phenolics and phenylpropanoids will also make terpenes and terpenoids. So you'll get those. You'll get monoterpenes in there with the phenols. These guys are more potent mostly than terpenes. So when you're looking at, say, monoterpenol and a phenol is like a monoterpenol on steroids. It's much more effective, but also much more dangerous to work with. I'm not going to read this out. You all know how cannabinoids work. I'm preaching to the choir here. I often talk to aromatic people that don't know a lot about cannabis or about hemp. So, they don't understand what it's useful for. And there are a number that are not psychoactive, and then there are some that are psychoactive, which we had the projector specially prepared to put that one in the mauve coloration. When people talk about the entourage effect, and they go on, and I've been at conferences, MJ BizCon in America, where a guy was up raving about the therapeutic uses of alpha-pinene and limonene, and etc. And I asked him, I said, mate, how much of that's actually in this medicine? Well, in this particular one, beta-myrcene is 0.47%. D-limonene is 0.14%. And 1,8-cineol, which is eucalyptol, is less than 0.001%. Now, in the aromatic world, if I tried to make a medicine at those levels, I'd be laughed at. There's not enough there to cause a physical or physiological effect. Can it cause a psychological effect, a neurological effect? Yes, they can, because you literally can have your brain chemistry altered just by smelling an aroma, which is at these sort of levels. But at a physical chemistry level, or trying to, say, put something on for topical pain management, they don't work at that level at all. And that's one of the big problems that we're seeing, that when people are doing research on the cannabinoids and medicines that are being made from them, they're going, oh, this stuff doesn't work properly, and this doesn't work. It doesn't work because these terpenes aren't there in sufficient amounts to let them work. How do we get this stuff into the body? We use bodily interfaces. And in the aromatic world, we go from olfaction, which is the sense of smell, through the skin, inhalation, respiratory, vaginal or urethral, intraoral, which is your sublingual and buccal in the mouth, intranasal, rectal, and then also oral, where you actually take it internally and it goes through the digestive system. And when I'm talking about the aromatic world or aromatic therapies, not aromatherapy, I stopped using that word because the corporates have bastardised it, you can see that as we move up through the knowledge base and becoming more and more educated and knowledgeable about how to use these things, the various dose forms and interfaces start to open up. You don't take somebody who's done a weekend workshop in aromatherapy or a multi-level marketing person and have them prescribing medicines that are taken internally. All right? I teach this sort of work. It's a 500-hour course, and that's not even enough. Why do we use different body interfaces? We use them to bypass first-pass metabolism in the liver. Now, sometimes you want to use the liver to change the component you've got in the medicine into a more active form. And the example of this is D-limonene in orange oil. If you take orange oil internally through the gut, basically through the mouth, in first-pass metabolism, it will convert that to pyrrole alcohol. And that monoterpenol is really antimicrobial, anti-cancer. The US government owns the patent on that. Funny that. But in many cases, you don't want to go there. And this is where we use the nasal mucosa, we use the intraoral mucosa in the mouth, in the nasal passages. We also use the rectal mucosa, suppositories. Now, many people would tell you that suppositories, cannabinoids don't work. Well, they do. You've just got to get the carriers right. You've got to have the right terpene mix with them to facilitate that to work. And there are some of you that have done this and used it and know this, but a lot of research studies focus on isolated cannabinoids. They don't look at the full family of the cannabinoids or the terpenes that go with them. The various body interfaces and the dose forms that you use with them. Again, this is days worth of material in an hour, so sorry for rushing. Capsules, tablets, chewables, sprays, liquid dose forms, slow release capsules, suppositories, douches, etc. And some pictures. A variety of different things. Look, I use a lot of different dose forms, both with aromatics and with cannabinoids. And again, the body interface and the dose form is controlled by what you're trying to treat, where you're trying to get, the patient you're dealing with, the person you're prescribing for. I use suppositories. These are baby suppositories. They're like a 1 milligram suppository for babies and young children to treat bronchial pneumonia. And it's a very effective dose form, along with a pharmaceutical nebulizer. Attack it from above and below. And then, of course, you've got your liquid dose forms for cannabinoids in carrier oils, and they call them tinctures. They're not tinctures. Tinctures are made with ethanol and water. This is an oil dilution. But it's very common. In the aromatic world, there's a lot of books that, in the last 20-odd years, the library of books has improved. And the same for cannabis. The library of books has improved. It's gone from the do-it-yourself manuals on how to make whatever to some really good research. And this is good because it means that these industries are starting to mature and starting to move into a more science-based way of dealing with the facts and with the knowledge. Dosing. There are two types of aromatic and also cannabinoid dosing. There is the more holistic, the lower dose. We use this for chronic conditions usually, or there's the much bigger dose for acute conditions. And when I'm talking about aromatic therapies, this is the aromatic warfare style of dosing. Think about you've got avian influenza or COVID. You want to wipe it out. You're not going to sort of have a nice little vaporizer going in the room. You're going to nuke it because you want to change the terrain and destroy that virus. These type of dosing levels, 1,200 milligrams a day, 450 milligrams a day, these are fairly high in the aromatic world, and you don't do this in a willy-nilly manner. You don't just do a weekend workshop and start doing this. It requires quite a bit of study and practice. You might ask me, well, how do we work out the dosing levels, Mark? You use the literature. Aromatic medicine started in France back in the early 1900s, and there's over 120 years of working with doctors in France with this. So you have to be able to read French, and most of this bottom row of texts are all in French, and a couple up the top are as well. There are a few English ones as well. This is where I study. This is where I go to glean the knowledge that I need to help people, as well as over-the-counter medicines and clinical trial work. I've done quite a bit of clinical trial work with avian influenza and dengue fever and the like. Cannabis dosing. This is, again, I'm not going to preach to the choir here. You people know what you're doing with this. So this is, again, entry level, and I did pull some slides out. Effective dosing is different for every different person and for every different condition. The ratio of THC to CBD is important, again, depending on what you're trying to work with, and also the background of the person you're working with. Ethan Russo said back in 2018, start low, go slow, stay low. When you're dealing with novices, with people that are not experienced cannabis users, you've got to do this, because if you don't, they're going to end up going off the deep end, and they're going to have a freak out and walk away and never come back. Types of cannabinoids, what we tend to see is the high THC dominant material, THC CBD balanced, and the CBD dominant, which is pretty much what the industrial hemp you're growing around here is. And from what I've seen and smelt over the weekend, I think there may be a bit of the other two floating around somewhere, but I know nothing about that. And each has its place. One of the biggest problems with the THC dominant form is everyone thinks, it's reefer madness, this is what the government's pushing. If you use a high THC variety in a suppository, you don't get high, but you get really major pain relief, and that's important. There needs to be more education around this, because you're not going to eat the suppository. Well, some people might, but so what if they do? It's medicine. There's a number of things to consider for cannabis dosing: the experience, the time of day, prevention, the previous dosing, and whether or not it's been decarboxylated. If you're using non-decarboxylated cannabinoids, they don't have the psychedelic effect, but they do have really good anti-inflammatory effects. So we're starting to see, I work with a lot of companies over in America as well, and we're starting to see, aside from the idiocy around taking CBD and converting it into Delta-8 THC, we're starting to see people targeting this and starting to work with the acid forms, not doing decarboxylation, and also new extraction media, not just using CO2, but using water extraction. When we look at pain, there has been a plethora of medications over the years. Clove oil is a great analgesic. We've seen the poppy one already. Cannabis is in there too, but then you've got things like chloroform and a few other nasties floating around. Cocaine. Well, they were all legit medicines back before 1920. What is pain? Again, we've got some definitions. How am I going time-wise, by the way? I've got no idea where I'm up to time, so I don't want to run over.
You're about 20 minutes in, so you've got about another 40 minutes, Mark.
Oh, cool. I'm going too quick. I have to slow down, or I have to tell stories. Or you can ask me questions. Pain is really personal. Pain is very subjective, and it changes. Every person feels and experiences pain differently. You have a physical component to pain and you have a psychological component to pain. But there's more. All of these lower your pain threshold. It's the same with sleep. One of the best ways of breaking someone psychologically is to put them in a room and not let them sleep for 3 days. You don't need drugs. You just keep them awake listening to awful music and flashing lights and stuff, and they crack very quickly. Pain lowers this threshold. This is a positive feedback loop. The more pain you feel, the more pain you feel, the more pain you feel. And until you break that cycle, it's just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse. But we're really lucky, and I don't know if you can see this, but aromatics and cannabinoids, they do all of these, except for the anesthetic. They help to raise your pain threshold. Being happy, laughing. Laughter is good medicine for pain. Being distracted is good medicine for pain. The sense of smell is the only part of the brain, the sense of smell targets 5 areas in the brain. All other senses only target 1. So scent is a really good distracting agent because it gets your limbic system as well as your conscious mind as well as your memory. Very powerful. So, acute pain. I've hit you with a hammer. Or you've had gallstones. Very recently, I've undergone gallbladder surgery and I've had about 8 or 10 episodes of gallstone attacks. That's acute pain. That's a screaming on an operating table, put me to death pain. I had that. Chronic pain, I think, is a lot more insidious though, because it wears you down. And it's there day in, day out. This is the one that will cause you to take your own life or make everybody else miserable. And I've seen this a lot with Aromatics, helping to remove chronic pain, particularly with carers. And I'll get to that very shortly when I get to some of the aromatics I want to talk to you about. Nociceptic pain, that's the overstimulation of those nerves. Neuropathic pain is the nerves. And then you've got the psychogenic pain. You can cause pain just by thoughts. Right. How do we deal with the physical pain? Well, there's a number of these functional groups, which I've talked about very briefly. Sesquiterpenes and sesquiterpenols are found in aromatics like sandalwood oil is a really big one for that. Capana resin. Who tries to get the best version of hemp that's got beta-caryophyllene in it? Anybody? Anyone chased it? So in hemp, beta-caryophyllene is less than 1%. In Capana resin, it's 80% of the oil. So if you want beta-caryophyllene, you get Capana resin oil and you add it to your product. Much easier way of finding it. 1,8-cineol is in eucalyptus. That's one of the most common compounds in the Australian aromatic pharmacopoeia. Pretty much every plant I go looking at out in the bush, it's usually got cineol in it. And you get a bit sick of smelling it after a while. But it has some really good effects, and I'll talk about that shortly. The psychological aspects of pain. There's a functional group there, esters, that you do not see in cannabis. You see a little bit. You see them more in hops. You'll see some esters in hops. That's that fruity smell and fruitiness. You do smell a little bit, but there are a lot of aromatic plants that have massive amounts of esters that are useful for dealing with this and adjusting the psyche. Plus you've got your cannabinoids as well that can help in both areas. The itises. When I'm teaching, I like to sort of show people the commonality. With inflammation, they're all itises. And they all have one of these causes, and the symptoms are pretty much all the same for itises. And these 4 that are on here are the 4 that are listed there that are in orange. So in treatment, you're wanting to stop the infection if it's an infection-based inflammation. And generally with infections, you get that. So cellulitis is a good one. You've ever seen people with cellulitis? Their tissues are bright red. One of my last trips in hospital, I was in overnight to have a stent pulled, and I had this bloke in the bed next to me. He just had was having a gastric sleeve done. And I happened to look at his legs, and his legs were swollen, edemic, and they were bright red. And I said to one of the nurses, do you know he's got cellulitis? And they went, what's that? So I did some lymphatic drainage on him with some aromatics I happened to have with me, and I turned his bright red, angry legs that were at stage 4 cellulitis, about to go septic and start ulcerating, back to being pale pink, just with one treatment. Physical trauma. Again, we know physical trauma. Chemical trauma, smelling bleach or some such, or drinking. The inappropriate immune responses are your autoimmune diseases, and we're seeing more and more of these today, where the immune system is hyperstimulated. Could be we're too clean. There's a lot of theories going around about that we don't get enough bugs, we don't eat enough dirt, we don't get our hands in the soil, we don't have enough pathogens, parasites in our bodies. So there's some ways of dealing with that. All of these symptoms, though, can be easily treated symptomatically using aromatics and cannabinoids. And here are some of the groups or functional groups that we can use for doing that. For inflammation, as I said, if you just target the symptom, it's a Band-Aid effect. You need to find the root cause. And unfortunately, a lot of GPs these days won't go looking for the root cause. You have to be your own doctor effectively and go digging to see what is really going on and then ask for the right questions. Incorporating anti-inflammatory carriers, things like St John's wort, aloe vera into your dosing, and the appropriate dose form for the condition. If you're trying to deal with an internal, a systemic inflammatory condition, you need to use a systemic dose form, an internal dose form of some type. This is a lecture in itself, the types of extraction technology. We get things from steam distillation, physical pressure. The more modern extraction terminology that I work with a lot is CO2 extracts, both in the cannabis world and in the non-cannabis world. We're now starting to see a lot more use of co-solvency, where we're using ethanol as an alcohol, as a co-solvent with CO2 to clean up the extracts. Some of you that have seen CO2 extracts, they look like this goopy mess in the jar. And the reason for that is poor use of technology. You can tune it. I've actually done a video. I did a lecture overseas for this. If you want to reach out to me, I can share the link with you. Or I might even put the link in the Dropbox, we'll see. Deterpenated oils, that's another topic, and fruit extracts is another topic as well to chat about later, and maybe in another lecture next year if they have me back. The extraction technique, though, determines the chemistry and determines the uses. And I've got a couple of different ones to show you a bit further along. Come on. The most prevalent plant in Australia that got given away to the rest of the world many years ago by our government. And so now we're a net importer of eucalyptus oil, where at one point we were the champion of it. We used to win all these gold medals at world shows and trade shows and the like. But no, our government decided to give it away. And so, China now runs that race. There's a lot of eucalypt species that are very under-researched and underutilised. We've got about 20 that we commercially harvest, but there's a lot of other ones that really need to be looked at. Standard eucalyptus oil is rich in 1,8-cineol or eucalyptol. That's the compound there. These are its therapeutic uses. It's a bloody good expectorant. If you've got congestion in your lungs or in your gut, this will help purge it. It's also a good anti-inflammatory and analgesic, so topically, it's great for pain relief. And many of your topical natural pain relief products will have this compound in them. It's also a really good solvent, will cut through biofilms, but this is one of the things that people don't often know about, that it's a dermal uptake enhancer by 95 times. So if you put some eucalyptus oil in any of your topical dose forms, they will work better. They will absorb faster and you'll get more therapeutic action out of them. And it's really, really simple. This is the chemistry of them. Now, remember I commented about the cannabis? These are the minor components in the terpenes in eucalyptus oil, right? Limonene at 6%, not 0.5 or something, Myrcene at 1.1, and that's a low level for myrcene. You'll see some myrcene in another thing later. But 1,8-cineol at 65 to 70%, not less than 0.001%. As Paracelsus said, the dose makes the poison, but it also makes the medicine. The aroma science guy gets out in the forest with chainsaws and helps people work. So that's why that title was coined on me by one of my students. They said, "You're like Bill Nye, the science guy." And I said, "No, I'm Mark Webb, the aroma science guy." Because I work in aromatic plants from conception through to end formulation. I do everything in between. We were regenerating these eucalypt radiatas down at Tumut. This is when you cut them off and they recoppice. These had been let go a bit long, so we're having to drop the trees. It's a bit of a long-winded regeneration process, but we did it. Australian kunzia oil. Now, some of you may know about this plant. If you don't, you're going to learn about it real quick and you'll know why you want to use it. I've been working with this plant for 24 years. It came out in my book, Bush Sense, which you've seen on the screen a couple of times today. It's an innocuous-looking plant. The chemistry is pretty not special, but it is special. And it's special because of this synergy of the alpha-pinene the 1,8 cineol, and these 3 compounds, which are sesquiterpenols and sesquiterpenes. So these guys are anti-inflammatory, this guy's anti-inflammatory, these 2 are analgesic. So if I put that oil on a sprain or a strain or a bruise, it goes away straight away. And you get about 3 hours of relief on its own. This was the original TJ Austell listing for it. It's since been superseded. It's a very pleasant smell. It's synonymous with the Australian bush. If you smell Kunzia oil, and I've got some with me, by the way, if you want to have a smell later. I've got all these aromatics with me. I predominantly use it for pain management and respiratory, but it also works against viruses. And this company, Zia Relief, started out as a little family-based business. They're now turning over millions and millions of dollars a year in the Australian market on Kunzia-based products. Their original cream, jams, etc. This is their concentrated massage oil that I created for them. And when I went to Mind, Body, Spirit in Brizzy the other month and I ran into Michelle, who's the naturopath there, she said, that's our biggest selling product. Everyone loves it. They love it because it works. It's been properly formulated. Rosalina. This is another Myrtaceae. It's the sister to tea tree. If you want to talk about energetics for a minute, yin and yang, tea tree is a very yang, masculine oil. Rosalina is very yin, very feminine. It's very soft. And when you put the 2 together, you get a lovely synergy between them. The Rosalina reduces that terrible medicinal smell and taste of tea tree. Anyone here put tea tree on their tongue to fight a viral infection ever? That's an acquired taste. People do it, but it's not that special. This actually comes from just down the coast. Any of you drive past Coopanook or Foster or Karua, you're driving past this. It's on the side of the road in the ditches. It's a very special oil. Dr. Pennywell, was a very unique aromatic medicine practitioner. He came to Australia for about 3 years and started the aromatic medicine movement in Australia. And he described this oil in this book in 1998. When Daniel was here in 2005, I took him for a road trip up to Port Macquarie. And I stopped on the side of the road at Karua and I got him out of the car and he's going, Mark, what are we doing? I said, I've got something special to show you, Daniel. And I took him over and I showed him the plant and he said, what is this? And I said, smell it. He didn't know it was Rosalina because he'd only ever seen the oil because one of the distillers here had sent him that oil from Australia. He'd never actually met the plant. He learned a lot that day. There are 2 forms, or 2 chemotypes, or as you might have heard in the cannabis world, chemovars is another title. That basically, they look the same, but they're chemically different. The northern form has more linalool, the alcohol you find in lavender. The southern form's got more cineol. They both work. This one's more pleasant smelling. Roman chamomile. Remember I mentioned esters before? Roman chamomile is the granddaddy of ester-rich plants. It's very expensive. The oil of it's sitting around the $3,500 to $4,000 a kilo mark at the moment. But this is massive in its esters. 1 drop of this oil neat on your carotid artery will put you to sleep. It is as powerful as a pre-op tranquilizer. That's how good it is. So whenever I mention this in my classes, I get all the mums going, how much is that again? And they make up a blend, apply it to their kids, and they're off to Nine-Eye Land. Very powerful, very, very potent. When dealing with psychological issues, this is one of my go-to aromatics for that, to help people deal with massive trauma. You get a really good night's sleep. You do not go into those night terror type spaces. It's very special. The various types of ginger in the world, the steam distilled, the subcritical or liquid CO2, the select CO2, the total CO2 and the oleoresin. The quickest way to describe these is to compare them to a musical ensemble. This is your couple of people playing out in the street like we've had at the Savo, wandering around out there. This is your string quartet. This is your orchestra. This is your orchestra with the rock guitars and the whole shebang. And the oleoresin, that's the grunge band. Because oleoresins are dirty and kind of manky smelling. They're old technology. That's what they used to make food flavourings with using hydrocarbon solvents. Not particularly nice. So when we're looking at ginger, the steam distilled oil, it contains none of the pungent components, the gingerol or the shoergol. This is the essence of ginger, and if you've ever smelled ginger steam distilled oil, it's kind of insipid. It's like really just not there. It's missing something. When we look at the CO2 extracts, the select is about 3% of the pungents. The total is about 30% of the pungents, and that's what I use a lot, is the total extract. It's very powerful, very potent. These are the guys that give you the anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial and analgesic effects. This is the stuff that gives you the anti-nausea effects. So whenever I'm making a nasal inhaler for pregnant women, some total ginger extract, some deterpenated peppermint oil, maybe some sweet orange oil or some mandarin oil. That takes care of their nausea. If you get motion sickness, you take some capsules with the total ginger extract. You don't get sick. I get motion sickness. I'm a test dummy for this stuff. Do we need to talk about this one? Yeah, okay, all right. Typical profile for a non-THC hemp. This one is AC/DC. I picked it. Why did I pick AC/DC? Because it works, but it's also one of our Akadaka, the best rock band in the world? No? Okay, all right. I don't know, peasants. This is the CO2 extract profile. The problem with a lot of these CO2 extracts is they're grungy, dirty material. They've got to go through a short path, recombination still, etc., etc. Or you have really, really good high-tech gear, molecular stills and the like, and this is what good extract should look like. Now you'll note the differences with this. Look at the terpene profiles, how high the terpene profiles are. These are full extracts that have been rebalanced properly. I know Katrina Park, we got chatting on LinkedIn, and when I go to America to teach, I also go to America and do some work in various places, which will remain nameless. And you get to meet some really interesting people that are very passionate about this stuff. They're probably the cleanest and most potent extracts you'll ever see. She makes crystalline, she'll grow CBD crystals. They grow these most amazing crystals and sell them like that. It's just amazing, stunning. Come on. Case study. I'm not going to give you this case study. I'm going to tell you a case study instead. And this is why I got into working with cannabinoids and aromatics. I was in a lab in America, in LA, in 2017, doing some formulating work and helping improve their products. And one of the guys in the lab was in his late 20s. He's hobbling around. I said, "Oh, what's wrong with your leg?" "Oh, I've been in a horrific motorbike accident 6 years ago. I've got a titanium rod in my femur." He mangled it pretty bad. And he became addicted to opioids and had to go cold turkey off them. So he said to me, "I'm in chronic pain and I haven't slept a decent night's sleep in the last 6 years." I went, "Okay." And he was running the short path. And at the time we were distilling a full spectrum THC clone. This is important. So I grabbed some extract off the short path, nice and warm, runny, looking like clean honey. Grabbed some of that, and I grabbed some of the isolate chemistry. I had some alpha-pinene and a few other bits and pieces. And now normally when I'm prescribing, I follow a very regimented form when I teach prescribing, same as we do with herbal medicine. I'll show you what I'm talking about very quickly. You have your objectives, you have your functional groups that give you those objectives. You have your oil blend made up of the functional groups that match, and then I do a cross-check of the two to see, yeah, am I in the right ballpark? And then I work out the percentages in the formula, and then I work out the dose form. That's how I train people. But when you know how to do this, you jump over all those steps. And when you can read people, as I do, I went, okay, you need this, 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 and this, bang, 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 there you are. Drop your jeans and put this on. So he did. Rubbed it on and back to work. And I said, tell me when the pain goes away. About 5 minutes later, he said, my leg doesn't hurt. I said, good. Here's the bottle, made it up, gave it to him. He comes in the next morning to work, walks up to me, puts his arms around me, crying, gives me the biggest hug, and he said, I got 8 hours sleep last night for the first time in 6 years. Now, as a therapist, that's gold. That's what we work for. I was blown away by that because the combination of aromatics, and Kunzi was in there, would normally give you, if I do it with aromatics alone, I'll get maybe 12 hours of relief. He got nearly 24 hours of relief. And I said, okay, so don't put any on. Let's see how long it takes. I was there for another week. 4 days before he started to feel any pain, just from that one bolus dose. So then I reformulated it. I cut it back to about 12% of the blend. And that was good enough for 1 daily dose. So he could put it on topically before bed, wait the 10 minutes, pain went away, went to sleep, and he would only start to feel a little bit painful at night. So that was a really good dosing level. It also meant that it had efficacy and it was well tolerated. And I gave him the formula and I said, but wait, there's more. This is just one recipe. You can vary this because the chemistry of it these objectives, look at all the different functional groups that cover them. So I can change the monoterpene. So in the case of Kunzia, has got monoterpenes. Rosemary has monoterpenes. The monoterpenols are in this one, and this one. Okay, you see what I'm talking about? I don't teach recipes per se. I teach how to make the recipe. A good cook doesn't use recipes, do they? They know how to do it. They just grab whatever and make it. You can do the same thing with aromatics. And that's why I came here today, because Gerald asked me to share some of this. I'm blown away at the synergy and the efficacy improvements you get using aromatics with cannabinoids. And I think that's it. Questions?
Thank you, Mark. If you have a question, please put up your arm so we can find you.
One at the back corner.
Yep, coming.
Yell it out.
No,
you
don't.
need
No,
to record
you
it.
can't
Sorry.
yell it out. We're
Shush.
recording.
I'll be quiet. I'll go and have some water.
Hey, my name's Zach. I just wanted to say first and foremost, thank you from everyone sitting in here because that's absolutely beautiful to hear with that patient. 1 dose, 24 hours of relief. That's just, I nearly cried just hearing that, mate. So I can't imagine.
I did cry.
Yeah.
It got me because I know what chronic pain's like. I've seen people top themselves with chronic pain. I've had to bury them, and it's not a nice thing.
You give a shit, which is really lovely to hear. And it wasn't really a question, it was just a thank you from the bottom of my heart. Okay. Second question is, how do I educate myself with that brain of knowledge of yours? And
Sorry?
How do I educate myself with that brain of knowledge of yours? How can I become a student of yours?
This is 30 plus years of knowledge across multiple fields. I teach. I travel around the world. That's one of the things I do a lot of. I'm starting to do a bit more online stuff. This is the first time I've been in Nimbin in decades. I think I'll be back.
Please do.
I have a suspicion that there'll be probably a workshop or two maybe run up here to teach some of this stuff, to put it in a little bit more framing, if there's interest in the community, that is.
Oh, absolutely.
And, there are people that I spoke to yesterday that aren't here, but then I think they got the timing wrong too. So anyway, people will come. Those that were here that needed to hear this heard it. So
I've been coming here for 10 years, and this last 45 minutes an hour that I've been sitting here, I've learnt absolutely just vast amounts of information and knowledge. So thank you so much.
Cool. Anybody else? John, have you got a question? So I know I've heard about your background, sir. I know what your background is. Is any of this applicable for you? Right. Yes. Okay. So John just mentioned the side effects. So the beauty of synergy of aromatics with cannabinoids is you can lower the dose levels to still achieve the level of efficacy. The same with opiates. So that combination of cannabinoids with opiates, that lowers the side effects. You don't get addiction. And I've got the research papers, they're all in the Dropbox. Oh, I'll move on again. So those of you that didn't see it before, they're the various references. Being an academic, I put them in. You're not going to read them. But they're all in the Dropbox. Pretty much all of those, all the important ones, are in the Dropbox, ready and waiting for you to download. And you can read them yourself. I'm not talking bullshit. This is the science of it. Okay? So I found that one of the biggest problems of cannabis in the past, THC cannabis, has been the smoking of cannabis as a dose form. And yet, from a recreational perspective, that's great. You want to get high? Go, power to you, go do it. But as a medicine, that doesn't work. There are a lot of people in the elderly population, in the corporate population, that don't want to be smoking up a joint. They don't want the stigma of it. They don't want the side effects of it. So these internal dose forms, these other topical dose forms, these are much more appropriate for dealing with that, and you don't get the side effects. Okay? You can use really high doses of THC in a suppository, for instance, for dealing with chronic pain. You get none of the high, but you get the efficacy. If you ate the suppository, because it's made of cocoa butter, so you can chow down on it if you want, not the nicest shape. You look at it and go, oh, no, I think that's got to go in somewhere else, not in my mouth. But it'll make you as high as a kite, absolutely screaming off your face. One of the problems with edibles, and I had this discussion at MJ Biz with people that make edibles, is how do you dose load them? How are you controlling your dosing? And they go, oh no, we just make the oil and we make it. And I go, that's a medicine. That medicine should be milligram dosing. Have you heard of the British Pharmacopoeia standard for 10% unders and odors? And they went, what? I said, that's what all pharmaceutical medicines are made to. Now, in the edible space, it's more like food. It's a more recreational cottage industry kind of thing. But if we want to make medicines that way, they've got to be medicines. One of the things I hate about the gummy market is gummies, because kids will want to have them. And there's been a lot of problems overseas, particularly with gummies, because people don't put them in a child-proof container, or they don't wear them appropriately, and the kids get into them. And then that comes back on real medicinal uses, unfortunately. Questions anymore? Yep, front. And then we'll come back up there. Because again, I'm sitting... Oh, you've already got a mic? Talk. No, speak first.
Okay, hi.
Can we kill that light so I can see people? Pretty please.
If you smoke a joint,
yep,
and the dope has got different terpenoids in it,
yep,
do you destroy the terpenoids that are in it to get to the THC? Like, do they all disintegrate at different temperatures?
When you smoke meat, you get flavour carried over. You do get flavour carry over in when you're smoking that joint, when you're burning the material. You do get some oxidation, you do get some breakdown of it. It's not the best method of treatment. If you want to get all of those terpenes into your system without damaging them, don't use heat. The best method, if you want to take them orally, like through the respiratory system, is a nebulizer, an air pump nebulizer. That one there. So putting them in a safe emollient in water, and then nebulizing them, turning them into microparticles and breathing them in. You're not going to get any heat degradation. You're not going to get any transferase. You're not going to get any oxidation of them. You're not going to get any of the nasty components you get when you burn plants. You know, one of the biggest problems with tobacco is not the nicotine. The nicotine's fine. It's all of the other crap that comes out of tobacco smoke, all of the tars, etc. That's where the cancer comes from in nicotine, as they've found with nicotine vapes and nicotine lozenges. See this? This is an Narcan sprayer that they use, that most ambos carry, that's what they use to deliver Narcan into a patient. It's a nasal needle nebulizer. I made up some aromatics like this and dosed students in my class. They found it a little bit aggressive. This is nicer. Well, that's nicer, I should say. Other dose forms, aromatic honeys, sublingual sprays. So you can use sprays like this under the tongue is another good one. Nano-emulsion sprays are really, really potent and give great efficacy because you get no breakdown of the medicine. It doesn't degenerate. You can formulate it. It's a discrete dose form. How many of you have seen someone in the office spraying the back of their throat with a throat spray? You don't think anything of it, right? So you can deliver cannabinoids and aromatics that way as well. And it's highly effective, particularly for anything in the brain. If you're dealing with depression or psychological issues, this is a great dose form because it goes straight into the circulatory system, goes straight to the brain, comes back out of the brain, goes back to the heart, goes out to the rest of the body, and then it finally gets to the liver to be broken down. So using the right dose forms and delivery methods gives you the best efficacy and means you can use less. If you're putting it into an edible or into a capsule, 90% of it's destroyed in the liver in first-pass metabolism. So it's not very effective. Right, that was that one. Yeah, you.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'd like to say how much we appreciate the knowledge that you've shared with us today. Would you be able to expand a little bit more on the CBDA and Kunzia entourage effect that you spoke about briefly earlier on?
Yeah, so because... Which one am I going? That's Bush Sense, by the way. That's the book that I wrote 22 years ago, and I'm in the middle of writing a new edition of it and working on it, but I keep getting distracted with things called work and life. I'm currently putting together an aromatic cuisine course, teaching cooking with aromatics as well, so it's more fun. Where are we? Where's Kunzia again? Right. So, in much of the cannabis literature, you see people raving about alpha-pinene as being this great analgesic and anti-inflammatory. But as I mentioned before, there's not enough of it in those clones, in those varieties of cannabis, to do anything on a physical level. By combining it with an aromatic like Kunzia, or you could use pine oil. It's got lots of alpha-pinene in it. But if I was going to use pine oil, I'd have to use pine oil and eucalyptus oil and then find something with these sesquiterpenes and sesquiterpenols, and they get a bit harder. So I can replicate this by using other aromatic plants, but why would I bother? And I'm in Australia, so that's why I love Kunzia. So by getting that dose level up to around, normally when I'm making aromatic topicals, I'm running Kunzia at anything between 30 and 50% of the blend in the formulation. And then I adjust that formulation down from a neat blend. And you can use it neat on topically. If you've got a sprain or a strain or a cork thigh and you're going to get a bruise, just put a couple of drops on, fixes it. I use Kunzia for sciatic massage. I'm a lazy massage therapist. I don't like spending 20 minutes trying to get someone's glutes to release. I'll put 2 drops of Kunzia on their glutes, rub it in quickly, go back to working on the rest of the leg, come back 2 minutes later, release the glutes so I can get to the sciatic, release the sciatic. Smarter, not harder. It's the same in that. And then, that's for acute dosing, and it's very well tolerated at that level, by the way. And I'm not recommending you pour Kunzia all over you all the time. That's not the deal. I'm not a multi-level marketer trying to sell more oil. If you've got chronic pain, you can bring it back to 5% in a blend. 10%, 15%, 20%. So what we're seeing a lot more now, and the Zia Relief products are a good example of this. The cream is, I think it's 3%. The bath salt's about 1%. The balm is about 5%. The concentrated blend, that's I think 25% in that blend. So you have differing dose forms and differing formulations for differing targeting levels. So the way I look at it is, if I'm doing an all-body treatment, like in the bath, I use a really small amount because I've got a very large surface area to absorb it. But if I've got tennis elbow and I'm only treating this, I want to use the concentrate because I'm only putting a small amount on a small area. Wintergreen is an aromatic you see in a lot of like tiger balm liniments and denka rub and those sort of things. It's quite toxic. It's very effective, and for small point source delivery, it's great. It's not great though if you're a university college student who is wants to get into a fraternity, and they decide to rub you down with wintergreen or denka rub from head to foot, including your genitals, because they think it's funny because it burns. There have been a few college students in America die from this, from overdosing on wintergreen. There's been countless hospitalisations from it as well. It's not a smart thing to do, okay? So dosing, you can use these really potent aromatics that do have some side effects, but they've got to be looked at appropriately and used in a meaningful way. Right? Things like kunzia, lavender, they're okay. Unless you're using them day in, day out, week in, week out, then you'll end up with possibly building up an allergen to it. So I often, in therapy, will change the flavour, change the recipe. And I've said this to a number of clients that I do work for. This recipe's for this season, or this for this year. You know, next year, let's do a slightly different recipe, will we? That way, your long-term clients aren't going to end up developing allergens to it. Right, any more questions? We've probably we've got one up the back there behind you. Actually, someone's holding their hand up.
G'day.
G'day.
So, of course, ADHD has been very prominent in the zeitgeist the last few years. You know, a lot of things related to kind of time management, procrastination, motivation, all that kind of stuff. I'm sure you have a lot of people coming in.
Yep.
And of course, like the medication itself is quite effective, but then does have side effects and tolerance builds, which doesn't really make it sustainable in the long term. What kind of linked in with CBD do you find kind of commonly prescribed and used effectively for ADHD?
For dealing with ADHD and a lot of these, what I call acronym diseases that have popped up in the real world, in the world today, get people off social media, get people out, stop them watching the news, get them into meditation and exercise, eating good food, and using aromatics like rosemary for focus and clarity. So I've made a number of blends for clients for focus to stop that procrastination. Procrastination is also about the gallbladder, by the way, energetically. And I'm a devil for procrastination, or I was up until this thing decided to shit itself the other month, and now I'm not. I'm powering ahead. So as far as cannabinoids go, I don't see them as being super useful because they're already in a befuddled state. They're already in a not focused state. It's not the best medicine for focus, but the terpenes are. And there's a number of terpenes that give you good focus. Kunzia, anything with monoterpenes, anything with 1,8-cineol, anything with the lemon-scented aldehydes, so your lemon myrtle, your lemon balm, etc. At low dose, they're really good focusing aromatics. Bright, clear, sharp. If you think about the analogy there of bright, clear and sharp, you want to be in that space, you find the aromatics that smell like that and they actually put you there. Okay? I think I'm done because I think you're going to kick me off the stage, aren't you?
I was going to say, thank you so much, Mark. That's incredibly fascinating. I think most of us want to go away and start sort of studying this more carefully. So please, let's thank Mark Webb.
So, oops. You can email me at mark@aromascienceguy. You can get me on socials.